In news from Jamaica, former chairman of the National Housing Trust, NHT, Howard Mitchell, has shot down several of the recommendations put forward by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, to revamp the state-run agency. Mr. Mitchell says while the NHT needs to revisit its mandate, some of the suggestions put forward are impractical. More on this report from Leslie and Sherwood.
The National Housing Trust, NHT, was established with a mandate to provide affordable housing solutions to Jamaicans. But over the years, several contributors, especially low-income earners, have complained that the NHT has failed to benefit the poorer class of Jamaicans. That's just one of the underlying factors that the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, took note of in its study on the NHT titled The NHT: Wrong Funding, Wrong Target, Wrong Strategy. In its findings, CAPRI suggested that the NHT revamps its operations and begins to explore other ventures, like tapping into the rental market. Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, Dr. Horace Chang, agrees that the NHT has failed to provide affordable housing solutions for all its contributors.
The Prime Minister is looking at NHT and how it functions. That's why we have taken some time to set up a board that we feel can ensure that it fulfills its mission, which is to provide shelter for its contributors. And there obviously it has functioned over the years, but it has not been successful in providing the required service to all its contributors, and we would like to see how what we can do to broaden their capacity to deal with a large percentage of their contributors.
Dr. Chang says the new JLP government has plans to review the mandate of the NHT.
Right now, it is really providing primarily for a narrow band at the upper end, which, and last count, some 60% of the contributors were not benefiting, and if you took out the inner city housing, which is a kind of creation to reach that group, it might be even higher. So there is work to be done. We are examining that, and as I said, the policy will emerge, and the Prime Minister in particular will speak to it in his budget debate.
Among their recommendations, CAPRI also suggested that the NHT allows the private sector to construct low-income houses instead of the state. But former chairman of the NHT, Howard Mitchell, says that is an impractical recommendation.
While I agree that the efforts of the National Housing Trust to meet the mandate that was given to it in 1976 have not been entirely successful, the answer, in my opinion, is not to throw out the baby with the bathwater and depend on the private sector to build low-income housing. We need to define low-income housing. If we're talking about housing that is $7 or $8 million or $9 million, that is, in today's world, that is not low-income housing. Low-income housing that I speak of is $3 and $4 million, even $5. The margin of profit involved in the building of those houses, except on a very large scale, is not sufficient to motivate the private developer. Okay? And in countries, in economies like Jamaica, we have to, the large-scale building of low-income houses is the exception rather than the rule. So that we have to have a niche, a protection for those individuals in a low-wage economy, in an economy that is not fundamentally sound and which is wide open. You have to have a protective device for those individuals who earn low wages and who cannot afford houses at the level of $7 and $8 million. And only the state can provide that, and it has to be subsidized to some extent.
CAPRI also urged the NHT to broaden its concept of providing housing solutions and begin looking at the rental market instead of focusing solely on home ownership. But Mr. Mitchell disagrees with this proposal. The former NHT chairman says that goes against the concept to give all Jamaicans an opportunity to acquire their own home.
That's the particular suggestion that I take issue with, because I think that, first of all, in a young culture like ours, a young nation like ours, what you try to do is to give people a rock to build on, something to build their lives around, and that's a home, not a transient rental situation. In addition to that, We have an underground economy, and the problem is not so much, and you will see it if you go to those communities where low-income houses have been built. You see how rapidly the people build on and expand those houses. So it's not so much that they can't access funds, it's they do not access funds in a traditional, normal, predictable manner. And therefore, when you put in a system of rental, unless you have a rent to own, what you are doing is condemning a man to living in somebody else's house for the rest of his life, which doesn't exactly lend to him putting down roots in the society and building an asset that he can then use to leverage himself into other areas.
However, Mr. Mitchell concurs that the NHT's operations need revision in order to ensure that the trust fulfills the mandate for which it was established.
I am perhaps convinced, even partially, that the NHT may not have been doing as efficient a job as it should have been doing. Right? But the answer, as I say, is to make it more efficient, to look within the structure to see if you can find ways to accommodate more private investment at the higher levels and maintain a sector or a segment for low-income housing.
I'm Leslie Anshaud for CEEN Caribbean News.